So identity. Identity is something very interesting, right? We have identity rooted in a lot of different things, obviously, in the way we look, our skin, our race, our culture, and then our gender, and then the different ideologies that we have adopted in our lives and that we follow. But as a woman specifically, right? Do you ladies believe that there is an identity outside of any of these other roles that we wear as mothers, wives, and um, caretakers?
You mean personally
Yeah,
or
personally.
society wise?
No,
Both.
personally.
I want to know yeah, definitely personally, but like the fact that you even said that makes me really curious about what you think about society.
Oh goodness. Um yeah, I mean I absolutely think that I have an identity outside of being a mother, a wife, what I do for work, those different things. And it's extremely important to me to maintain that sense of self. But yeah, I think society wise, when you get some of those labels, it kind of, a lot of times people assume that it's supposed to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? That it's supposed to, somebody tell me what the word, I don't know, I can't say it, but that it's supposed to kind of define you. That's what I was trying to say. That it's supposed to define who you are. Especially, I think mom even more than mother. I mean, even more than wife, because when you become a mother, people just like, mothers don't do this, and mothers don't dress like this, and mothers don't, and it's like, what? We were women and people and human beings way before we birthed children, and we still are. So I think especially when it comes to mother, there's a very specific definition that society has for what a mother is supposed to be. And sometimes that can be very difficult to navigate when you're trying to keep that autonomy, as a fully realized human being.
Yeah, we are more than that. We are also co-hosts. So just a little plug. Don't forget that we will be live in Houston, me and my other co-host from Let's Talk. We will be in Houston April the 23rd. Get your tickets. There's literally only a few tickets left. So I hope to see you guys there in person for the meet and greet and the live show. So just wanted to add that in there. But yes, Cannon, I love what you said. It's hard sometimes to find identity outside of motherhood, or at least that's how my mother feels in terms of like turning the mother off, and just thinking about herself. That's always something that through her life we discussed, because it was always about us since we came.
Yeah. Yep.
But what do you think, Nicole? What do you think? Do you think that women have identity or have a sense of self outside of those roles?
I think that it's necessary to have a sense of self outside of. However, I think that too many times moms succumb to the pressure of the outside influences and the external influences. So, in addition to societal influences, there are often familial influences, especially when we're talking about like the matriarchs of the family, moms who believe that your entire sense of self-worth was wrapped around how good a wife and mother you were. My people are from Mississippi, so we have like Southern value sets. Um, and it, you honestly have to be very intentional, and you have to make consistent effort to retain your identity in the midst of mommying and wifing, because like once your children are old enough to go to school, they don't call you Mrs. Harris, Miss Harris, they call you mom. Okay, mom, so this is what Nigel did in class today. Mom is nowhere on my birth certificate. It's nowhere on any identification that I own. It doesn't say mom, it says Nicole. But people often try to reduce your identity to motherhood or spouse once that's who you become. But yeah, I definitely feel like that's actually something that I push on all the women that I know. Do not become a casualty of your relationship. Do not become a casualty of motherhood, because if your children move out you'll be completely lost. Once they get old enough to move out, you won't know what to do with yourself anymore. If your relationship ends, you won't know what to do. You won't know what you like. You won't know who you are. So you need to keep that going even while you're in the midst of all those relationships.
So you kind of perfectly segued like into the question, and Cannon, I know that you um were about to weigh in. And I'm sure it's gonna be along the same thing, but like the question we were gonna ask is, do women lose their sense of self once they're married or once they have children? And Nicole, you absolutely like did the perfect segue right into that, because that's what we were just about to talk about. So Cannon, give your input on what Nicole said and your answer to the question about women losing sense of self.
Yeah, I can actually bundle those two answers right into each other. Because what I was going to add to what Nicole said is that not only can it be detrimental, just like, oh, if the relationship ends or, once your children leave, I think that it can be detrimental to the relationship as well when you lose who you are and that identity. Because if like all you're doing is doing stuff with kids all day, doing stuff for the house all day, you just hyper focused on this very specific thing, and you don't have any outside interest or anything like that. I mean, that can kind of make the relationship stale. Like you don't really have anything new or interesting to discuss or talk about. Like how many times are you gonna be like, oh, guess what the baby did today? Oh, guess what the kids was doing? Like that's gonna get real old real quick. Like what do you have interesting that's going on at all? So I think that not only can it be a detriment, like if the relationship were to end, but I think that a lot of times women do lose their identities in that, and that a lot of times it is actually detrimental to the relationship. Because think of what a lot of people say when they end: we grew apart, oh, we didn't have anything to talk about, oh, we just we got lost in the day-to-day. And that happens a lot of time. And then when people start to seek outside influences, it's because it's something different. It's because there's something interesting going on, and different things like that. So I think it's great for the relationship for you to maintain some type of sense of self-identity, because then that keeps everything interesting, not only for you, but for your partner and even for your kids, because you show them something too, instead of just being mom, right? You get to have something interesting to bring. So
Yeah. I think your kids should know who you are. I think they should know who you are and what you're passionate about and what you do in life. And they're not going to know if you don't actually do these things and still make time for these things. I remember growing up, my mom was super passionate about tennis. She's still passionate about tennis. She plays with all the ladies and they have their team and they do their thing, right? And they play against other ladies across town, and there's like old lady beef and whatnot. You know what I mean? It's like a thing. And I love it. Like she always like had a life, and I always I think her also having a life and like sharing it with me also helped me with a lot of different situations, because I remember when she would be like, I grew up with some of her girlfriends like that I knew because I knew them from growing up. And as I got older and, a teenager, she would tell me about different things, and I would have a better understanding. She's just like, Kayla, in friendship, da 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 da. And like, I don't know, having your own life, I think is important for your kids to see, to get to know who you are, other than like, you're just their mother and you're here to serve them. No, that is not it. I'm here to guide you to be you're going to be out here with us. Okay. So I want you to do the best that you can. That's just my opinion, but yeah.
So, as a person who's not married yet and doesn't have kids yet, I,
Amen.
think about this, and I don't know, like, I think that once, like for me at least, I think that once, I'm married and I have kids, that I will see that as part of my identity as a person, but then like not losing certain things about myself as well, like making sure that I can still, do my artistic things, be my quirky self, like be my, be me, while still, having these additional, parts of me that come with, those things. So I don't know. I think that, Cannon, you said something about society earlier, and I still want to get your thoughts on that, because I think sometimes in terms of like the sense of self being lost, a lot of people feel like they need to fit into like a mold of whatever people think is a good mother or a good wife. Whereas you can really, be a good mother, you can be a good wife with your own personality in there, with your own passions in there. You can really make that into your own thing based on you. So, I'm glad that Cannon and Nicole, I'm glad that y'all are here because y'all both have kids. Cannon, I know you're currently married. Nicole, I know you've been married. So like just getting that perspective from you all will be very important, I think. So like why do you all think that sense of self gets lost? Do you think that it has to do with societal pressure, or do you think that it has to do with something else? Like what happens to make that change? Because I mean, we all know you can be a good mother and a good wife while also, being yourself. Like you don't have to change overnight into, oh, well, I got to leave my old self behind. Like, of course there will be things that change, but what do y'all think about that? Either one.
Um,
Free for
I
all.
didn't follow anybody. It's spring break. My bad.
I think Kayla and Kay, I think both of you, I don't think either of you are going to be in danger of losing your sense of self because of how strongly instilled in you your sense of self already is. I think a lot of times what happens in marriage, because it happened somewhat with me, is if you don't have a strong enough sense of who you are before you enter into this relationship, then it's easier to get it crushed, and it's easier to get manipulated out of it. And it depends on how high your sense of self-worth already was. If you had a low sense of self and you feel like no one loves you, or you don't feel like you're valued, sometimes people just say, I want someone to love me, at all costs, at whatever cost. And so anytime someone shows them anything that looks like love and they can't recognize that it's not, then they'll enter into relationships, because some people just don't want to be alone. And so not understanding how toxic some people can be, they'll just say, well, he loves me, he treats me well, and they marry. And so because they're not fully grounded in self, then they lose themselves in trying to make sure that this person remains happy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good perspective that you have. Because I think I agree. Like if you already have a strong sense of self going in, you're not going to just lose yourself once you become married or you have children. Absolutely. What you said makes sense. I get it.
The only
Can
thing,
it?
the only
Oh,
thing
go ahead.
I have to push back and say is that I don't really think it's a worth thing. I don't think it's a self-worth thing. I think it's more of an identity thing. And I think that really applies a lot to a lot of women and men, people in general, that marry very young, because you go from somebody telling you what to do and what to think all the time to now having to get on somebody else's page, or at least compromise with a good deal of the things that you think and feel. So that not having actual identity at all is how people like get in situations where they have like resentment and they don't know why. But it's because they were going in a direction that they didn't really want to go, but they didn't know what direction they wanted to go. They just know that like this wasn't comfortable. But they don't know what they want. So they're like, let me just do this because this person cares about me or whatever, So I don't know. I don't think it's a worth thing. I think it's more of an identity thing. And that's how people grow apart, because people don't really know who they are and they root their identity in this other person until they grow the hell up. And then they're like 40 and they're like, okay, they realize like who they are, what they want. They know everything. They've learned themselves. And then they're like, okay, this isn't it. And people have to go their separate ways. That's just what I think.
Kayla, I think that's an interesting point. Because as someone who is about to be married within the next month, I do think that it was very important for me to learn myself. Like for some people that takes a long time, for some people it takes less time, but I think really knowing who you are is how you can have a more successful relationship. And then there's like that opposite end of that spectrum, right? Where you kind of grow up, and you right away get married, and that can work too, because there is no disconnect. It's just straight from your parents to a husband or whatever. So I can see it both ways, but like for me personally, I definitely think that, you know, living alone, knowing who I am, like without anyone else, you know, makes my relationship better now because I'm not totally dependent on my fiance for, you know, everything about me, right? So I think that, yeah, Kayla, I agree with you in terms of like the identity thing and getting to know yourself, knowing what's going on with yourself, so that then you can be a good partner for someone else. Because if you come in with nothing and you're trying to learn yourself, you're going to attach your identity to theirs. And like you said, that can cause resentment and all types of things, problems. Whew.
That used to happen a lot when I was young. Like I remember like my college boyfriend, like I started like saying stuff that he would say and like talking like him. And I was like, what?
Oh, that's gonna happen
No.
anyway.
But that was my
Yeah,
first, like,
people real
I
off,
thought we were
right?
gonna be like married, you know? So that's like that was really, really serious relationship. But still, like sometimes that stuff just happens when you're young. Like you just start like even not in relationships, even with just friends, you can get a new friend and they use some language all the time around you, and now you use this language. That's like as an older person, I do not do that anymore. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's a maturity thing. I have no idea.
I think it's just a natural, like, I don't know. I feel like people that you're around a lot, especially when you live with them, like certain things are just gonna pass off to each other, especially the longer that you're
Well,
near
true.
each
Yeah.
other. Because yeah, Cannon, you were like, that's gonna happen. I was like, it sure
Yeah, that's
does.
gonna happen anyway. You're not even gonna know who you're gonna be like, why do I sound like
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Why am I using this phrase at this moment?
Right. And then
What?
everybody else is gonna start telling you, you sound like such and such. You're gonna be
Yeah.
like, oh my God.
And everyone says y'all sound alike, right? Mm.
But what I was gonna add, like I think that you guys are all touching on like different aspects of what could happen because it's a very nuanced situation, right? It's not just, you know, one thing that leads to something, especially something like that. But while I think that there are some people who go into these relationships that maybe don't have a strong sense of self or that maybe don't have a strong sense of identity. But I think that we have to be careful altogether because you can have a super strong sense of identity and still get into the middle of the situation and not even realize that you lost who you were until like you look back and because you're so caught up in the day to day, especially if it's something you've never done. Like if you've never been in a marriage, a long-term relationship like that, if you've never had children and then now you have like, it's something that I always say you can't describe or explain to someone until they do it. And it's different for everybody. You know, it's not one size fits all the same, but it is something that you can't really, like you can plan to a certain extent, but you just can't really plan for it. And so to answer your question, Kay, whether or not it's like societal pressure or I think it's a lot of both because I feel like, especially when your children are small, a lot of that expectation of what happens with that child is going to be reflective of the mother. Like that's just the reality society wise, like, right. They're going to be like, this baby dressed like this, or this baby, this or that is going to always go back to the mother. Maybe once children get older, maybe people will start, you know, putting both parents in it. But I know when they're small, it's going to be very reflective on the mother. And so I think that that pressure you can't put that on yourself to, especially, a person that, you know, because I think a lot of us go into parenthood want to be good parents anyway, right? You want to be the best parent. Mm-hmm. So that will put a lot of pressure where you're hyper focused on trying to make sure you do everything right. How, you know what I'm saying? You don't want anything to be out of place. You want to make sure you're not breaking this baby. You know, you want to
right.
do.
You done read every book and watched every video.
Right, exactly. And you just, you know,
my
doing
friend just had a baby. Yeah.
Everything. All the little mommy groups and all the other things. But there's just a lot of stuff in the day to day. Sometimes I don't think we realize that our energy is finite. Like we don't have like just unlimited energy. So it's
kids do though
to get lost in that.
Especially them toddlers.
Like
you're not tired?
It really seems like they do. It's a way to wear them out, but you learn it over time. But yeah, okay. they really do seem like they just got finite energy, but I mean infinite energy. But that goes for both you and your relationship with your partner. Like sometimes you can get so caught up in just trying to make sure you do that well, which you should do it well. but you just turn around and you don't even realize that you haven't been given any energy to who you are and what you want, and you just kind of get caught in the middle of it, and you look up and be like, oh my goodness. And then especially I think that happens a lot with us as Black women, especially. I don't know about in which generations or whatever, but I can definitely speak for in my generation and what I experienced. I feel like a lot of us, and probably before that too, were socialized to take care of everybody, right? To kind of be responsible for everybody, whether it's younger siblings, whether it's cousins, like just to be like to be selfless, right? To just always be, what do other people need? What do this? What do that? So I think you can kind of get stuck in that. And then to the point that when you do decide to do things for yourself, you feel selfish doing it. And you like, oh, this is how am I supposed to do that for
Yeah, my
myself?
mom used to
I'm
say
supposed to take
that.
care of myself. Like I feel so selfish, but I think it's important for us to realize that we can't do everything for everybody, especially if we aren't taking care of ourselves first. Like that's how you get broken down over time. And that's how you get
too.
you kind of get worn out. Like you have to replenish your battery just like everyone else does. And it's not unfair to anybody else to do that. So I think that we have to always kind of keep sight of that. Like there is a balance. Like you definitely want to make sure that you are setting up your kids to have the best possible life, and that you're focusing on making sure that you have time with your partner and that you're focusing on your relationship. But you also have to take time for yourself too. Like you have to, like it's an important, all of them, those things are important pieces. So you can't just put your piece to the side and just be like, okay, I could just leave that. I feel like that's actually the most important piece. Because only through taking care of yourself can you take care of other people. Like that's
it's like when you're on the airplane and they're like, make sure you put your
mask on first.
Yeah. Before you help your neighbor.
Exactly. You are a better mom when you're taking care of yourself. So just imagine if you are able to do things that you like sometimes and step away from the kids sometimes and get rejuvenated. You have more patience. You know what I mean? You have more clarity. But I mean, just trying to like kill yourself to be like, I have to do all of this and I have to focus on, then yeah, that's how you get burnt out, wore out, you losing patience with the kids, and you know what I mean, and stuff like that, and not realizing why you don't have any energy. And it's like, yeah, no, you have to take care of yourself sometimes so that you can actually be a good mom and so that you can be a good wife. And I think it's super important too when it comes to being the wife, because you and your husband were partners before you had these kids, right? And y'all like stuff about each other. So you want to make sure that you are, again, able to maintain that relationship like as a man and a woman, right? You don't want to just be like a husband and a wife or a mom and dad together. Like me and my husband, like we've known each other since we were 13 years old. So we're like friends. And so it's important to maintain that level of spontaneity and interest. Like you can't even be interesting, like I say, if you don't grow yourself and focus on yourself. You can't surprise your partner and be like, oh, she into this now, or anything like that, if you just not even growing or focusing on yourself at all.
There has to be some interest. There has to be things like, I think throughout life, regardless, we're always supposed to be learning, always supposed to be growing to the day we die. Anybody that thinks they know and they have it all figured out, I mean, that's a problem. So I think that overall that this should be an agreeable topic. Look at us women being agreeable. I can't even believe it. We haven't disagreed yet. This is crazy.
Look at us understanding that different people can have different experiences and different opinions. Oh my goodness.
It's wild. Who would have thought?
That's not how it works on the internet. Okay.
Nope. Y'all have aired, blah, blah. It should be a fight by now, right? But we're out here agreeing.
So, but that does make me want to bring up Amira's video. Right. So I was watching this video of Dr. Amira. She's a dentist. She's also married to an NFL player. And she was talking on this podcast called The Pivot, I believe, where she was speaking about just like women's identity within their relationship, within their marriage. And she was talking about a situation where she had met someone and the person introduced themselves as so-and-so's wife. And she was like, I make it a point to introduce myself. Like when someone says, oh, are you so-and-so's wife? She's like, I'm Amira. Nice to meet you, And so I just thought that was like really interesting because she has figured out, like she's the unicorn that we all love, right? She's figured out how to balance running a dental practice, being an NFL wife, having 2 kids and, still doing socialite things. And I see her out and doing, so I think that when certain women that marry certain men, I think that they believe that the identity in that relationship is more valuable. Now, when we get back to the whole self-worth thing, more valuable than their own sense of self. Just like women these days can become like famous from being like somebody's baby mama. You know what I mean? Like, is that not a thing? I'm pretty sure that's a thing. So, so there's the other side of the coin of women that say that like their identity is rooted in who they're with, especially if that person goes on to be renounced or Martin Luther King, you know what I'm saying? Like, so what do y'all think about that?
No, I think that absolutely happens where, I mean, even if you think about just the way traditionally produced once you get married, right? It's Mr. and Mrs. the male name, right? Like that's just kind of how we engage. And even if you think about like in some of these spaces, like it's used as a insult and as a badge of honor, like being married, being a wife, like, oh, you're not a wife, or oh, you're a wife. It's like, okay, like
Right.
all right. I guess it's some kind of amazing thing happened once I got married that just, I don't know. But you see it a lot, right? That's used to kind of assess the value of a woman, is her proximity, I guess, or desirability to men, or I guess
Or
validation
men.
by a man. So yeah, that absolutely happens where that becomes their primary identity. Like, I'm such and such wife, or I'm his. And but like now, since marriage is not as popular as it used to be, then yeah, a lot of people settle for the baby mama status. But yeah, which is still tied to being in proximity to some man. So